Today, on the first episode of Video Workbench, I set out on a quest to find a better method of doing variable ND. I tried a lot of options, and I found a lot of issues I didn't see in any other reviews. I tested 5 matte boxes and 6 different VND systems. I evaluated color cast, ghosting, handling of direct light, and ease of use. My name's Austin, and I'll take you through my problem-solving process to finding the best VND and matte box solution for run-and-gun videographers and documentary filmmakers. Let's get to work. If you're new to the craft, VND stands for Variable Neutral Density. It's like sunglasses for your lens. It gives you a fourth method to control exposure that is separate from shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO. For cinematic filmmaking, these 3 settings are usually locked to preserve motion blur, depth of field, and image quality. So, VNDs are essential tools in situations where you can't control the lighting. To start, I'll explain the problems I have with my existing VND system. I currently shoot on the Sony a7S III on the 24-70 G Master and the 70-200 G Master Mark II. I use these Hoya VND filters, which fit inside the hoods that come with the lenses. The hood is important because when light shines directly on these Hoya VNDs, it severely reduces the contrast in the image in a way that's difficult for me to compensate for in post. The Hoya setup is compact and mostly effective, but I also have a lot of problems with it. First, it takes about 5 minutes whenever I want to install one of these. I have to take the VND out of the carrying case, clean both sides, since the NDs can touch each other in my current case, and create smudge rings. Then I take off the lens hood, screw on the filter, and reinstall the lens hood. When I go from inside to outside, I have to repeat the same process. Second, I can't just leave the ND attached when I put the camera in the bag because the default Sony lens caps don't fit on the Hoya filters. Third, when I want to adjust the filter, they set just inside the lens hood, so I frequently miss the ring, smudge the lens, and get my fingers in the shot. Just a note here, the lens hood for the Sony 24-70 GM Mark II has the same kind of filter door as the 70-200. So that might partially solve this problem. Fourth, the Hoya filters add a noticeable color cast to the image. Fifth, I want a visual upgrade with a matte box, but it needs to look professional in some situations and incognito in others. Finally, and this is what really kicked this project into motion, I was looking through some recent wedding footage and saw some strange reflection artifacts that I later learned are called ghosting, which is due to retroreflection between the 2 panes of glass in the filter. I usually see this around the silhouette edges when subjects are backlit by windows. During my testing, I found that the biggest risk factor for ghosting was the distance between the glass elements in a filter, and that anti-reflective coatings and filter design can help minimize it. I got so annoyed by these artifacts that I'm willing to spend some serious money on a solution. Now, I know at this point, some of you might be thinking, if you've got serious money, why not get an FX6? True, a variable ND inside the camera body would solve a lot of these problems. However, when I'm traveling, I'm looking for the most flexibility per unit of space, and the FX6 can't record external audio when the top handles are moved, so it's not ideal for gimbals. It's also awkward to fit into carry-ons with the rig fully assembled. I'm looking for a solution that would fit into my existing carry-on bags. So based on my initial research, I'm looking for a magnetic, quick-swapping VND system that can also fit inside a matte box. But this is way harder than I thought it would be. The first thing I tried is the PolarPro Helix MagLock filters. I really like these filters. They install quickly with a rotate and a twist. They have labeled stops with hard stops that prevent a cross-polarization X pattern. And there's adapters for all the different lens sizes I use. So I don't need a bag of a bunch of different filters for each lens. They also have tough caps that go on the front and the back. So I can just toss it in my bag when I'm not using it. Or I can just leave them on the lenses and put the whole thing in my bag. Also, the color cast is much less noticeable than the Hoya filters. There's also no ghosting. So the standard 2 to 5 kit is great. I also got one of the new VND PL 6 to 9 filters. I was not a big fan of the PL VND version of these filters. I couldn't reliably adjust the VND with just one hand. There's more friction on the VND ring than on the polarizer ring. This means that if I just use one hand to turn the VND, it turns the polarizer instead. I have to either quickly turn the VND ring to break the friction or use some kind of Vulcan grip. It's not that successful. It's especially inconvenient when operating a gimbal. By and large, though, I love the Helix filter system. So now I just need to find a map box to support it. And that's where it got tricky. Many clamp-on map boxes have bidirectional filter threads on their adapter rings, so you can install a VND and pass it straight through the map box hole. The Helix Pro base plate has a 92.5 millimeter diameter, so I thought it might work with some of the common 95 millimeter map boxes. But the base plate is actually just slightly bigger than the adapter rings for these map boxes, so it doesn't pass through the hole. And if you unscrew the base plate and mount the map box and then try to screw this in, the flaring and internal structure makes it impossible to screw in here as well. It's such a small difference in size that I thought maybe another map box would work. But I tried the SmallRig mini map box, the Tilta Mirage map box, the Freewell Eiger map box. None of the 95 millimeter map boxes fit. I was getting depressed. I even tried this flexible lens hood, but yeah, it looks terrible and blocks the manual focus ring, so that doesn't work. Finally, I decided to try PolarPro's Basecamp map box, since it does have a 114 millimeter opening. It does fit. However, the thread adapter they include is not bidirectional, so you can't screw on any additional filters. Also, none of the other clamp spacers that would fit around the lens allow me to mount it on the Sony 24-70 GM. So this was pretty depressing. Future Austin here. It turns out PolarPro does offer an official 114 millimeter adapter ring for the Helix system that lets you mount the Basecamp map box on it. But I didn't find out about this until months after the initial filming. There are some issues with this adapter, and I'll get into those later. So I still think it was worth exploring all these other options because it helped me arrive at a better solution. For now, let's get back to depressed Austin. As much as I love the Helix filters, it felt like I was fighting the commercial system here. I guess I'm gonna have to think about this differently. So I decided to look into VND map boxes. The first VND map box system I tested was Tilta's Mirage. When I started doing this project, the ability to go low profile was important, so VND map boxes were not my first solution. However, I learned that Tilta offers a special low profile clamp for the Mirage system. It makes the silhouette much more inconspicuous. Also, Tilta offers a lens cap that covers the filter in this configuration and a manual knob accessory, so I thought maybe it could work. However, when I got everything in and started working with it, I learned that the low profile clamp actually requires you to screw the filter into it, so it's not a quick swap. One unexpected benefit of the low profile clamp, though, is that you can rotate the filter around so that the control knob is on the left side, which is actually great for me. If I'm manual focusing, I don't have to change my grip to adjust the ND filter. The lens cap does snap onto the front of the filter, but it's not very secure. It comes loose when I pull the camera out of my backpack, and I'm worried it might come loose in the backpack while I'm moving. The whole point of the lightweight filter was to allow for easy stowing in travel scenarios, but it doesn't work so well in practice. In terms of optical quality, the VND filter was very disappointing. There was worse color cast than on my Hoya filters, which I expected from other reviews, but I also saw a lot of ghosting, which was one of the main problems I was trying to fix. This ghosting showed up in real-world scenarios too, where subjects were backlit by bright windows. I tried a lot of things to get rid of the ghosting. I tried adding a 1/8 mist filter from Vaxis in a stackable tray in the front, and it diffuses the ghosting in some ways, but it also accentuates it. I also lost a lot of field of view with the second tray. On the 24-70, somewhere around 30 millimeters was as wide as I could get without vignetting. Stacking the CPL and VND filters made the ghosting even worse. Stacking the CPL and 1/8 mist filter also caused ghosting. So basically you get ghosting in the Mirage system anytime there's more than one pane of glass that you're mounting. Also, the battery for the VND motor blocks the second tray if you have the extender installed. So you have to use the manual wheel accessory or use it without the battery and just via USB-C. On the plus side, in my real-world trials of the Mirage, the wireless system was a joy to use once I figured out how to mount the controller on my gimbal to match my typical hand grip. I made a little doodad that went from NATO to 50mm rod clamp and back to NATO rail, and it let me position the controller wheel next to my thumb so that I could control zoom and ND without changing my grip. The only interruption of this zen-like experience came when I had to go to a dark room and set down the whole gimbal so I could use two hands to pull this latch and remove the ND filter. Also, there's a weird quirk on the motor unit where it always drains the battery even if the screen is off. The first day I was going to test this, I put fully charged batteries in there the night before, and the motor battery was dead by the time I got to the location in the morning. The remote control unit does not drain the battery when powered off. It's only the motor. I checked the support website, and this is a known issue. They were just like, sorry, it's a hardware limitation of the motor design. The second day I was testing, I was using the motor battery unit and the motor decided to go to sleep, and I couldn't get it to wake back up again or connect with the controller. I swapped the batteries, it still wouldn't work. I was in the middle of the shoot day and suddenly I couldn't adjust my VND. So I just swapped to the PolarPro Helix filters for the rest of the day. I since learned that you can power the motor unit via the RS2's USB-C ports, which works really great. However, you can't use USB-C power delivery, so it doesn't work with my SmallRig VLock USB-C ports. It does work with a USB A to C cable though. In summary, I like the way the Mirage map box looks quite a lot, and the wireless motor on a gimbal is a truly zen-like experience. In fact, it's so great on a gimbal that it almost makes it worth the sacrifice in optical quality. Almost. But I need a solution where I don't have to worry about whether there will be ghosting that I only notice later when I'm editing. It's a real shame because they got so many other things right. So I decided to try a different VND map box that had higher quality optics. The Freewell Eiger map box is slightly taller than the Mirage, but I'm happy to report that their VND has minimal color cast and no ghosting. It also has a nice physical knob that keeps your fingers out of the shot. However, for some reason they put the knob on the right side of the lens. I would have preferred to have the knob on the left side where I usually have my focusing hand. Unlike the Mirage, they don't have a remote motor for their system, and the Mirage motor is not compatible. I tried. The mounting screws are different sizes, so that's not going to work. As good as the Eiger VND was, it doesn't have an inconspicuous mode. You can remove the hood of the Eiger map box, but it still doesn't break down to as small of a package as the Tilta system. On their website, I learned they do sell a lightweight filter mount option that's similar to Tilta's option, but they don't make a cover for the VND element. So I couldn't just toss this whole thing in my bag. But I noticed that the Eiger map box is compatible with their Freewell magnetic VND system. I thought that this might finally be the solution that I was looking for when I was trying to find a map box to fit the Helix filters. So I put another $500 on the credit card. In terms of the VND filters themselves, they're good. They appear similar in quality to the Helix filters. There's no ghosting, and there's minimal color cast. The way the glass combines is interesting, in that the filters are actually double-sided. If you take out the VND element, the 2-to-5 filter becomes a circular polarizer, and the 6-to-9 filter becomes a constant ND32 polarizer. There's also 2 VND elements that come with the kit, one clear and one 1/8 black mist. So that's some nice flexibility. In VND mode, the filters have hard stops, but you have to carefully align them for the hard stops to work. It's possible to put them on incorrectly, which you only realize after it hard stops in the wrong place. The filters also feel a little loose compared to the Helix system. And I don't like how the magnetic lens cap tends to take off whatever VND element you have mounted on there when you remove it. Also, compared to the hard metal lens caps of the Helix, Freewell's lens cap almost feels like it's made out of glass, and they pick up a lot of smudges. I know it may seem like I'm dunking on the Freewell system a little bit, but these are actually little quibbles. I was actually pretty excited about this solution, and then I tried it in the map box. The map box doesn't slide on over the filters like I'd hoped. No. You have to mount the map box, then painstakingly thread the VND base, then put the VND filters in there. And you can't just unclip the map box if you want to change lenses or stow the system for transport. You have to unscrew the whole thing. Still, if you don't plan to change lenses, it's technically possible to swap or remove the VND filters quickly because of the magnetic attachments. I tried shooting for a day with these filters in the map box, but my fingers would get in the shot when I reached around the map box to adjust the ND, and it took me a couple of tries to get the rings aligned correctly so that the hard stops turned correctly. The whole system worked a lot better when I switched from handheld to monopod because the camera didn't jostle as much when I reached around to adjust the ND. However, when I wanted to switch to my 70-200 lens, I just gave up and used the Helix filters instead. I realized then that maybe not being able to switch lenses quickly would be a deal breaker. So I decided to test my assumption. Do I really need a map box? I'm not trying to shove in rectangular filters or diopters. For me, the whole point of a matte box was to control the contrast reduction that happens when light hits the filter at a glancing angle. I decided to do some direct lighting tests on my old Hoya filters and the PolarPro Helix filters that I like so much. And I was shocked. I mean, look at this. The Helix filters show almost no reduction in contrast when hit with direct light. I could still get some flaring when I actually shined a flashlight on them, but even that just looked kind of good. It performed close to the Hoya filters with the lens hood on. I took the Helix filters outside in direct sunlight just to make sure, and yeah, I couldn't tell that the sun was hitting the lens. So I went back and tested the Mirage VND without the matte box hood, and it did terribly with direct light. So using the slim mount would have never been an option. The Freewell Eiger VND without a matte box did much better, but still not as good as the Helix. The Freewell magnetic VND filters have similar direct light rejection as the Helix filters, but just not quite as good. So maybe the Helix filters by themselves would be fine for 90% of the scenarios that I shoot. However, if I'm in a theater or some other edge case where focused direct light is shining on the lens, I want to be able to block it without using my hand. And I want the professional look a map box brings. So what haven't I considered? During my week of testing, I realized I left on my ND filter for most of the day. I did switch to a higher power when I went outside, but I only removed it twice when I entered a nearly dark environment. So maybe I should test another assumption, that I actually need to quickly remove the VND. So I ordered the PolarPro Recon. When the Recon arrived, it actually came with the normal VND and the new VND-PL version of the filters. I was confused at first, but I'm glad they sent both. First off, the VND-PL version has ghosting artifacts, because I assume they put more space between the glass layers to allow for the locking screw. When you install a second stage filter, those artifacts become even more pronounced. Whoa. The VND-PL version is also much more annoying to use. So there's a little bit of a give here whenever I try to rotate just the VND element. Oh, and now that I'm on 6, where it has a friction lock, if I try to rotate it off that, as soon as it hits that hard stop, it wants to turn the whole thing. It like unlatches from the polarizer. And it keeps slipping. Even the polarizer still has some hard stops. Also, the VND ring is much smaller now and more difficult to grip without looking. And so it feels like I'm gonna be turning the polarizer portion pretty easily. Plus, if you have the Recon hood installed, the hood turns with the PL ring, which just looks silly. I can like unlatch the front element and then like hold this and turn the polarizer and relatch it, but it's not a one-handed operation. The good news is that the old VND-only version of the Recon doesn't have any of these issues. Grip is much easier here, much easier to turn. The map box stays put when the filter turns, and there's no ghosting either on the first or second stage. It also has very little contrast reduction under direct light, just like the Helix filters. This is almost a good solution, except it doesn't quick swap. And the Recon filter strength is 3-6, which is a little too strong on the low end. You notice even at the lowest value here, it's already pretty dark on ISO 800. There you go, 12,800. The A7S III is my A camera, but I also have an FX30 and an A7 IV, and their second base ISO isn't as high. I'm concerned I'll find myself in an awkward spot where I just need a bit of ND inside, and 3 stops will just be too much. The front filter cover is also this chunky rubber thing, which is kind of a struggle to remove. When it comes down to it, I realize that the smaller, quick-swapping filters of the Helix just make me happier than the ability to have a map box. Meanwhile, while waiting for the Recon to arrive, I was watching a video from PolarPro and they were like,
this just clamps right onto any thread plate, doesn't have to be ours, or clamp ring that's 114 millimeters in diameter.
I didn't know I could get clamp rings from third parties. So now that I knew what they were called, I was able to find a set of 114 millimeter adapter rings from SmallRig that has filter threads on both sides. Apparently, they're also called reduction rings or donut rings. Turns out, this makes the Helix system work exactly as I had imagined. There's just a slight hint of vignetting at 24 millimeters on the 24-70, and no vignetting at all on the 70-200G master or the 16-35G power zoom. And there's no ghosting, so long as I don't use a UV filter. Normally, the Helix system doesn't cause ghosting when mounted on the front of a UV filter, but it does when you add the SmallRig adapter ring. This happened whether I put the UV before or after the adapter ring, and it happened with both my B&W UV filter and the fancy anti-reflective case UV filter I bought for testing. So it's caused by the space the adapter adds between the panes of glass, and it's not a coating issue. While I'd prefer to use a UV for safety, the Helix and matte box adapter ring already provides a front crumple zone in the event a tripod gets knocked over. And I intend to either have a Helix filter or Defender plate installed on the lens most of the time. Another note after using this system is that I still need to remove the matte box to add or remove Helix system filters, because it's hard to get my fingers around the edges of the matte box to reach the locking tabs for the filters. Now, it works fine if there's already a filter installed and all I'm doing is removing the Defender cap, because it protrudes out far enough that the locking tabs for the cap are in front of that edge of the Basecamp. But this isn't a big deal to me, because if I'm using the matte box while shooting, it's typically not a run and gun scenario. It'll be an interview scenario where we've got more time to make that swap. Hi, Future Austin back again as promised. I think it's probably a good time to talk about the official 114mm adapter from PolarPro. When I did my initial review, this adapter didn't show up on the Helix product pages or Google searches. It wasn't even mentioned on the product page on the website. This is about June of 2024. I actually discovered it by accident on their website. It's an option on the base plate item. So here's how it works. It either attaches onto the base plate of the Helix system, or you can put it onto the front of one of the MagLock filters. But what you can't do is put this on the base plate and then put a MagLock filter onto the front. There's no threads or filters on the front of this. So if I wanted to put a matte box on here, I'd have to put this adapter ring on the front of the filter and then put the matte box after that. And then clever viewers will wonder, well, how do you adjust the ND filter? Well, it's simple. You just rotate the entire matte box and it looks completely professional. If you really wanted to do it, you'd loosen the matte box, take it off, set your filter strength, put this back on. So it's definitely a multi-step process that's not really good for run and gun changes. I can see why they made this choice. It minimizes the distance between the front of the lens and any matte box glass you might be inserting. But that doesn't help me because I'm not planning on using matte box glass. That's where I think my system ended up being better, because the filter just sits inside. You can reach around and adjust it. So honestly, I'm glad I didn't learn about the PolarPro adapter ring sooner. If I'd found out about it when I was first filming this, I probably would have just said, good enough, and not gone on to make the rest of this video. Take it home, past Austin. Now, I really do have a solution that meets almost all my requirements. It lets me quickly switch filters between all my lenses. It has sturdy lens caps that let me store the camera while the filters are still on. It has easy one-handed operation, even on gimbals. This belt pack I got makes it easy to swap between filters when I'm running around. There are no ghosting artifacts. It has improved color fidelity compared to my old system. It has a matte box that gives a professional look and protects the lens from direct light in most scenarios. And the whole system fits in my carry-on bags. The only requirement it doesn't meet is that I still risk smudges when I reach around to adjust the VND when the matte box is on. However, I do have a workaround for this. The Basecamp matte box has a built-in filter turning wheel for its VND system that I tried to repurpose to turn the Helix filter. So far, my proof of concept uses rubber sticky grips, and it technically works, but it adds a bit too much friction to the ring for it to be comfortable. Maybe something with a 3D printer could help. Even if I don't figure it out, this system is still much better than what I was using. My final solution is a combination of 7 different products and has a total cost of $1,160 US before tax. Check the description for links that you can use to support this channel. I know it's not cheap, but it's cheaper than an FX6, and the final system is arguably more flexible than an FX6. So for my work, it's definitely worth it. Well, that about does it for this especially long first episode of Video Workbench. I hope you learned something and that all this saves you time and money. Also, let me know in the comments if I made a mistake, or if you have a VND solution that you love. I have a few other topics planned for Video Workbench, so subscribe if you want to see those. Finally, thanks to my wife for letting me build a YouTube studio in our shared home office. All right, time to pack it all up for a shoot. Be well and stay creative.